"We won't waste a cent on her." Dad's voice cracked across the dining hall like a whip, his words sharp enough to slice through the air. My uncles and aunts froze, forks hovering above their plates, eyes darting to me. Mom didn't stop. There. She leaned back in her chair with a smug grin and added, "Her husband can pay, if he exists." The table erupted in awkward laughter, the kind that wasn't really laughter at all, more like nervous clapping at a cruel performance. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, my nails digging into my palms, so hard I nearly broke skin. My cousin Amy whispered, loud enough for the others to hear, "Does she even have one? Maybe she made him up." A round of chuckles followed. I lifted my chin, refusing to let my face betray the heat crawling up my neck. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. Instead, I gave them the smallest smile, calm and deliberate. That smile silenced them for a moment, because deep down, they couldn't understand why someone humiliated wouldn't defend herself. Dad sneered, mistaking my silence for defeat. "Good," he muttered, clinking his glass. "At least she won't drag us into her mess anymore." But inside me, the silence wasn't defeat. It was fire. That night, I lay awake replaying every sneer, every chuckle, every dismissive glance. I thought about all the years I'd swallowed their mockery, all the times I'd been their easy target because I wasn't loud, because I didn't boast about what I had. They thought my quiet meant I had nothing. Morning came too quickly. Sunlight, streaking across the curtains, and the house was still buzzing with relatives who'd stayed the night after the so-called celebration. My father's voice carried down the hall, bragging about how he saved money canceling the useless banquet. My mother's laughter followed, sharp and satisfied. And then, 3 sharp honks cut through the chatter outside. The relatives shuffled toward the windows, confusion painting their faces. A black car, sleek, polished, the kind they'd never dream of renting, rolled up the driveway. The chauffeur, in a crisp suit, stepped out with precision, his posture commanding attention. Gasps rippled through the living room. "Who is that?" one uncle asked. The chauffeur didn't answer them. He walked straight past the gawking crowd and into the house, shoes clicking against the marble floor. Without hesitation, he approached my grandfather, who was sitting quietly in the corner with his cane. Respectfully, he bowed his head slightly and extended a cream-colored envelope with a golden seal. "Mr. Carter," the chauffeur said smoothly, "this is for you. Personally signed by Mr. Reynolds." The room went dead silent. Grandpa adjusted his glasses, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he broke the seal. He pulled out a thick invitation embossed with elegant lettering. His eyes scanned the words, and then he froze. His breath caught. Slowly, he looked up at me, his voice cracking with disbelief as he whispered, "This is from your husband?" The room erupted. My mother's smirk collapsed. My father shot up from his chair, his face drained of color. My cousins swarmed like vultures, desperate to see what was inside the envelope. I stood, calm and composed, my heart hammering in my chest but my face unreadable. I looked directly at my parents, their mocking words from last night still echoing in my ears. "Yes," I said softly, but firmly. "From my husband." And in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before in their eyes: fear. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself had stopped breathing. Grandpa held the embossed invitation in his frail hands, his lips moving silently as he reread the words. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, but no one dared speak first. Finally, his voice broke the silence, measured, serious, and trembling, with authority. "This is no ordinary banquet invitation," he said, looking at the golden lettering again. It's from the Reynolds estate, signed by your husband, Alexandra. The weight of his words crushed the smugness out of the room. My mother's smile faltered, her hand frozen around the glass of juice she hadn't lifted yet. Dad cleared, his throat trying to disguise his sudden unease. Reynolds? He scoffed, though his voice cracked. There are plenty of Reynolds out there. Could be anyone. But Grandpa shook his head firmly. No, not just anyone. The Reynolds family is one of the most influential in the state. Old money. Old power. If this is true. His eyes moved to me with a sharpness I wasn't used to. Then you've all made a terrible mistake. Murmurs broke out like fire spreading in dry grass. My cousins whispered furiously among themselves. Aunt Linda fanned herself as though the room had turned sweltering, and my uncle muttered, Impossible. She couldn't have. I rose slowly, letting my chair scrape against the marble floor, the sound deliberate and sharp. My heart pounded, but my face remained composed, unreadable. You wanted proof? I said, voice steady. There it is. Mom's voice cracked, the superiority gone, replaced with a frantic edge. Stop pretending, Alexandra. Some printed card with a fancy seal doesn't mean anything. Anyone could have made that. She turned toward Grandpa, her tone sharpening. Dad, don't fall for this. The chauffeur, still standing near the doorway with perfect posture, raised an eyebrow. Without a word, he pulled out his phone, tapped a number, and put it on speaker. A crisp male voice answered almost instantly. Mr. Reynolds's office, the voice said. The chauffeur spoke calmly, every syllable clear. This is Daniel, confirming the delivery of the invitation to Miss Alexandra Carter's family. There was a pause, then the voice replied, Confirmed. Mr. Reynolds personally requested it be delivered this morning. He'll see you all at the estate this evening. The call ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad staggered back as if someone had punched him. His complexion had gone pale, his arrogance dissolving into panic. Estate? This evening? His voice was barely a whisper. Amy, the cousin who mocked me the loudest, swallowed hard, her face drained of color. Wait, are we supposed to go there? My eyes locked with hers, calm but cutting. You weren't invited. My husband signed it. For me. And for Grandpa. That sent a shockwave through the room. Grandpa's brows furrowed, his cane tapping against the floor as he looked at me intently. Why only me? He asked. I walked closer to him, lowering my voice so that it carried weight, not volume. Because you've always been the only one who never mocked me when the others did. He respects loyalty. Grandpa's lips tightened, pride flickering in his weary eyes. Around us, the family's whispers grew frantic, like buzzing flies circling a wound. Mom suddenly snapped, slamming her glass down so hard the table rattled. Enough of this nonsense. If this man of yours had real power, why didn't you flaunt it sooner? Why hide him? Her words stung, but not the way she intended. I turned to her, my expression calm but laced with steel. Because unlike you, Mother, I don't measure my worth by parading wealth. I wanted a family who loved me for who I was, not what I had. But I see now. You were never that family. The truth hit harder than a slap. Her face reddened, and Dad sputtered like a man drowning. You think you can talk to us this way just because some man signed a piece of paper? No, I said, coldly, my eyes drilling into his. I can talk this way because you canceled my banquet and humiliated me in front of everyone. You mocked me. You told people I didn't matter. But now, the very man you dismissed as imaginary has given you more reason to fear him than you'll admit. The chauffeur finally spoke again, his tone professional but carrying an edge that left no room for debate. Miss Alexandra, the car is waiting. Mr. Reynolds instructed me to bring you and Mr. Carter only. His eyes swept the room, unbothered. By the desperate, wide-eyed stares of the others, Mom lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. Her nails dug into my skin as her voice trembled, no longer mocking but desperate. "Alexandra, please. You can't shut us out. We're family." I slowly pulled my wrist free, looking her dead in the eye. "Family doesn't laugh while tearing you apart. Family doesn't cancel your joy just to save face. Whatever you were, you lost that title the moment you chose pride over me." Grandpa rose with surprising strength, his cane thudding against the marble. "She's right," he declared. His voice carried the weight of decades of authority, silencing the room. "And if what we're seeing is true, then she's the only one among you worth standing beside." Dad tried one last time, his voice cracking under the pressure. "You'll regret this. Men like that, like Reynolds, they don't stay. They'll use you and leave." I looked at him, steady and unflinching. "Maybe. But unlike you, at least he doesn't hide his cruelty behind the word father." The chauffeur gestured toward the door. "Shall we, Miss Alexandra?" I nodded, turning toward the exit. My heels clicked against the floor, each step echoing through the hall like a final judgment. Grandpa followed beside me, his head held higher than I'd seen in years. And behind us, Mom's voice finally broke, trembling with fear. "What if she's telling the truth? What if he really is?" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was answer enough. Because deep down, they all knew this wasn't a game. This was just the beginning. The drive to the Reynolds estate was silent, except for the hum of the engine. Grandpa sat beside me in the back seat, his weathered hands clutching the invitation like it was a lifeline. His eyes flicked to me every few minutes, filled with questions. He hadn't asked yet. Finally, as the city skyline faded into sprawling countryside, he spoke. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Alexandra?" His voice wasn't angry. It was heavy, like a man carrying years of regret. I stared out the tinted window, my reflection pale against the glass. "Because I wanted someone to believe in me, without needing proof," I whispered. "And you did. That's why you're here with me now." He nodded slowly, his lips tightening. For the first time, I saw pride instead of pity in his eyes. The car turned down a long private drive lined with lanterns, leading to a mansion that looked more like a palace. Its white stone glowed against the early evening sky, fountains spraying, water high into the air, manicured gardens stretching as far as I could see. Grandpa's cane tapped nervously against the leather seat. When the chauffeur opened the door, a line of staff in black uniforms stood waiting. They bowed slightly as I stepped out. My stomach twisted, but I stood tall. "Mrs. Reynolds," one of them greeted respectfully. The words rippled through Grandpa like thunder. He looked at me, eyes wide. "So it's true," he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Inside, the grand hall gleamed with chandeliers that sparkled like 1,000 stars. Marble floors reflected our steps as if we were walking on water. Every detail whispered wealth, but none of it mattered to me more than the man standing at the far end of the hall. Ethan Reynolds. My husband. He wasn't in a tuxedo, but in a tailored dark suit, crisp and commanding. His presence filled the room before his words ever did. His jaw tightened as his eyes landed on me, softening in a way no one else ever got to see. "You're here," he said simply, his voice steady but warm. I nodded, my throat tight. For a moment, the world fell away. The sneers, the humiliation, the laughter. None of it mattered in his gaze. Grandpa leaned heavily on his cane, whispering, "You married him?" His disbelief wasn't contempt, it was awe. Ethan crossed the hall in long strides, his hand brushing mine, grounding me. "Yes," he said firmly, answering for me, "and I intend to make sure no one ever questions her worth again." Before I could respond, one of the staff approached with a phone in hand, whispering urgently. Ethan listened, his expression darkening. He turned to me, his jaw sharp. "They're outside," he said. My chest tightened. "Who?" He glanced toward the doors, where voices echoed faintly even through the thick walls. "Your parents, and the rest of them." Grandpa's head whipped toward me, disbelief flooding his features. "They followed us?" Ethan's lips curled into something between a smirk and a promise. "They won't get far without an invitation." We stepped toward the massive glass doors, and there they were. My parents, my aunts, my cousins, all standing at the gates, shouting, waving their arms. Desperation painted their faces, so different from the smug superiority they wore the night before. Security held them back, professional but unmoving. Their words carried faintly on the wind. "We're family. Let us in." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Part of me wanted to turn away. Part of me wanted them to feel every ounce of what they'd put me through. But Ethan leaned down, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You decide. Do they stay out there, or do they come in?" My fingers trembled at my sides. For the first time in my life, the power was in my hands, not theirs. Grandpa looked at me, his eyes steady. "Whatever you choose, Alexandra. Make sure it's for you, not them." I stared through the glass at the family who had mocked me, canceled my banquet, laughed at my silence, and now, stripped of their arrogance, they were begging for a place at the very table they'd once denied me. The decision would define everything, and I knew, when I opened my mouth, they would never forget what I chose. The shouting outside grew louder, echoing through the estate gates like the cries of beggars at a palace door. My mother's voice pierced through, frantic and desperate. "Alexandra, we're your family. Don't do this." For years, those words, "we're your family," had been twisted ropes they used to bind me, to silence me, to remind me of my place beneath them. But now, standing behind reinforced glass, with Ethan's hand resting protectively at the small of my back, those same words sounded hollow. Ethan leaned closer, his voice a low current of calm power. "Say the word, and they're gone." Chest rose and fell, the weight of choice pressing down. Grandpa, steady on his cane, watched me with unblinking eyes. He didn't interfere. He didn't plead. He knew this wasn't his decision to make. It was mine. I stepped forward, heels clicking against the marble until I stood at the threshold. The guards opened the doors just wide enough for my voice to carry out. My parents' faces snapped. Toward me, relief flooding them as if they truly believed I would save them from humiliation. I let the silence stretch, my eyes sweeping across every familiar face. My mother, trembling but still trying to stand tall. My father, jaw clenched in defiance, masking fear. My cousins, wide-eyed and whispering among themselves. Finally, I spoke. My voice was steady, cold, but not raised. "Last night, you canceled my banquet. You mocked me. You laughed when I was silenced. And now you stand here, begging for entry into the very life you once dismissed." Dad's face twitched. "We didn't mean it like that. You know how families joke." I cut him off, sharp and unwavering. "That wasn't a joke. That was cruelty. And you enjoyed every second of it." Mom's mask cracked, her voice breaking as tears welled. "Please, Alexandra, don't shut us out. We made a mistake. But we're still your parents." The word parents stabbed deep, but I didn't flinch. Parents protect their children. Parents don't strip them of dignity in front of a room full of relatives. You stopped being my parents the moment you decided my worth was a burden. Gasps rippled through my cousins, but no one dared defend them. Grandpa's voice rang out, behind me, firm and steady. "She owes you nothing." Ethan stepped forward, his presence towering, his tone razor-sharp. This estate welcomes loyalty, not mockery. Respect, not greed. Alexandra has the right to decide whether you step foot inside. I turned slightly, meeting Ethan's eyes. He didn't pressure me, he simply waited. And then, it all crystallized. I remembered the smirk on my mom's face, the way Dad raised his glass when he cut my banquet as if he'd won some cruel game. I remembered Amy's sneer, the whispers, the laughter. They had reveled in my humiliation. Now it was their turn to feel it. I straightened my shoulders, my words slicing through the air. Guards, close the gates. The command hung heavy. My family's expressions shattered. Mom lurched forward, nearly falling to her knees. Dad's face twisted in fury, shouting something that dissolved into nothing as the heavy gates clanged shut in their faces. The sound was final, irreversible. Behind me, Grandpa exhaled, a mixture of pride and sorrow. In his eyes, "You've done what they forced you to do. They made their bed, and now they're lying in it." I turned to him, my voice softening for the first time. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. But sometimes, the only way to earn it is to stop giving people the chance to break you. Ethan took my hand, squeezing it gently. His voice carried the final judgment. Tonight, Alexandra is no longer the girl they mocked. She is my wife, and she will never be silenced again. As the doors closed behind us, sealing the noise outside, I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't the quiet one at the table, the shadow in the corner. I was the one in control, and this time, they would never forget it.
The rain lashed against Emily's windshield as her car sputtered along the empty country road. The heater barely worked, and the frigid air seeped in through cracks in the doors. It wasn't unusual for Emily to be out this late. Working double shifts at the diner to keep the farm running was just her life now. Her father was too sick to work the land, and the fields that once fed their family were as empty as their bank account. But tonight was different. Something felt off. As she rounded a bend near the old mill, her headlights caught a small figure darting into the road. Emily slammed on the brakes, her car screeching to a halt inches away from the boy, who froze like a deer caught in the light. He was no older than 13, his face streaked with dirt and tears. His clothes were ripped, and he clutched his side as if in pain. Before Emily could react, 3 men emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted with malice. One of them held a knife, the blade gleaming under the faint moonlight. "Get away from him!" Emily shouted, her voice cracking with a mix of fear and anger. The boy's wide, terrified eyes met hers, and without thinking, she flung open the passenger door. "Get in!" she yelled. The boy hesitated for a split second, but the men were closing in fast. He dove into the car just as one of the bandits lunged forward. Emily hit the gas, her tires spinning on the wet road before the car shot forward. The men weren't giving up that easily. In her rearview mirror, Emily saw them scramble into a battered truck and start chasing them. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling as she weaved through the narrow road. "Why are they after you?" The boy was shaking, his small frame huddled against the seat. I don't know. They just started chasing me. I think they wanted to rob me, but I didn't have anything. They said they'd teach me a lesson." Emily's grip on the wheel tightened. She knew the type, men who thought they could prey on the vulnerable. Well, not tonight. Not on her watch. "You're safe now," she said firmly, though her heart was pounding in her chest. The truck's headlights grew brighter as it gained on them. Emily cursed under her breath and took a sharp turn onto a dirt path she knew well. The car jolted violently, but she held her course. The truck followed, its engine roaring like a beast in the dark. "You're bleeding," Emily exclaimed as she noticed the dark stain spreading on the boy's shirt. "It's nothing," he murmured, his voice weak. "Just, please don't let them catch us." Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. She couldn't drive forever, and her old car wasn't built for this kind of chase. Just as the truck loomed dangerously close, She spotted a row of abandoned grain silos up ahead. An idea sparked in her mind. "Hold on," she said, swerving off the path and into the tall grass. She killed the headlights and rolled to a silent stop behind one of the silos. The truck roared past them, its headlights disappearing into the darkness. Emily waited, her breath hitching, until the night was quiet again. The boy slumped back in his seat, his small chest rising and falling rapidly. "Thank you," he whispered. Before Emily could respond, another set of headlights appeared, but this time it wasn't the bandits. A sleek black car pulled up, and out stepped a man who looked like he didn't belong anywhere near these parts. His tailored suit and polished shoes were as out of place as a diamond in the dirt. "Oliver," the man called out, his voice laced with panic and relief. The boy's head shot up. "James!" James rushed to the car and opened the passenger door, pulling Oliver into his arms. His expression was a mix of fury and anguish as he inspected the boy's injuries. Then his sharp, piercing gaze turned to Emily. "You saved my brother," he said, his tone measured but intense. "What's your name?" "Emily," she said, unsure what to make of the man whose presence seemed to fill the entire space. "You risked your life for him," James said, his voice softening. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Emily shrugged, exhaustion catching up to her. "He's just a kid. I couldn't let them hurt him." James studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he were trying to figure her out. Then he smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made him look almost human. "You've done more than you realize, Emily, and I promise you, this isn't the last time we'll meet." Emily had no idea what that meant, but as James helped Oliver into the back seat of his sleek car, she couldn't shake the feeling that her quiet, struggling life was about to change forever. The black car's taillights faded into the distance, leaving Emily alone in the dark with her thoughts. Rain drizzled lightly now, soft against the quiet of the empty fields, but her mind raced. Who was this man, James, and why did he seem so powerful? He wasn't just any older brother. His polished demeanor, expensive car, and commanding presence screamed wealth and influence. Emily sighed, shaking off her curiosity. She still had to get home, patch up her leaky roof, and prepare for another grueling day of work. The life she lived didn't have room for mysteries, let alone wealthy strangers. She turned the ignition, and her old car sputtered to life, groaning as if it too was tired of the weight she carried. The next morning, the usual chaos of her life resumed. Emily worked the fields alone, pulling weeds and trying to salvage what little the soil could still offer. Her father's coughing fits came in bursts from the house, each one twisting her gut. The doctor's bills were piling up, the land taxes were overdue, and the bank had already sent their final notice. It was just another day in the life of someone who had been dealt a losing hand. She didn't expect a sleek black car to pull up the dirt driveway just before noon. Emily wiped the sweat from her brow with her sleeve, her heart sinking as James stepped out of the car, looking as immaculate as the night before. This time, however, he wasn't alone. A tall man in a crisp suit accompanied him, holding a leather briefcase. The scene was surreal. Two polished city men standing in front of her crumbling farmhouse. "I thought we'd never meet again," Emily said warily, walking up to them with her arms crossed. James smiled faintly. "I said we'd meet again, Emily. I keep my promises." "What's this about?" she asked, glancing suspiciously at the man with the briefcase. James's smile faded as his tone turned serious. "It's about Oliver. My brother hasn't stopped talking about how you saved him. He told me everything. How you risked your life to help him without even knowing who he was." "I told you it was nothing," Emily said, brushing off the praise. "He's just a kid. Anyone with a heart would have done the same." "Not anyone," James countered, his sharp eyes studying her. "You put yourself in danger for a stranger. That kind of courage is rare." Emily shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "What do you want, James?" The man with the briefcase stepped forward, opening it to reveal a stack of documents. "Mr. Whitmore," he began, addressing James, "has instructed me to settle all your debts." Emily blinked, stunned. "Settle my debts?" James nodded. Your mortgage, the medical bills, the land taxes, everything. Consider it a reward for saving Oliver." Emily's mouth fell open, but she quickly closed it, her pride flaring. "I didn't save your brother for money. I don't want charity." "It's not charity," James replied firmly. "It's gratitude. I have the means to help you, and you need the help. Refusing it out of pride won't change that." The words stung because they were true. Emily's father needed medicine. The farm needed repairs. And no matter how many double shifts she worked, she couldn't outrun the mounting debts. Still, the idea of accepting help from someone she barely knew felt foreign and uncomfortable. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice hesitant. James gave her a small nod. "Take your time. But Emily, this isn't just about you. Your father deserves a better life, and you shouldn't have to carry all of this alone." With that, he turned and got back into the car, leaving her standing in the driveway with a storm of emotions swirling inside her. Days passed, and Emily couldn't stop thinking about James's offer. The farm felt heavier than ever, the weight of every broken fence and empty cupboard a reminder of how much she needed help. Her father's condition worsened, his coughing fits lasting longer, and she found herself replaying James's words in her mind. Finally, she made her decision. She called the number James had left her, half expecting him not to answer. But he picked up on the first ring. "I'll accept your help," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Good," James replied. "I'll handle everything. And Emily, this is just the beginning." True to his word, James settled every debt. Within days, the bank stopped calling, her father received top-notch medical care, and the farm began its slow transformation back into something livable. Emily found herself overwhelmed, not just by the relief of her burdens lifting, but by the growing presence of James in her life. He visited often, sometimes with Oliver, who was still recovering but cheerful and eager to help around the farm. James himself seemed drawn to the place, spending hours walking the land and asking Emily questions about her life. First, she thought it was pity, but as time went on, she realized it was something deeper. James wasn't just helping her. He was invested in her strength, her resilience, and the spark in her that had saved his brother. The lines between gratitude and affection blurred, and Emily found herself facing a new kind of challenge. She had spent her life fighting to survive, but now she had to decide if she was ready to let someone else in, to trust that James's intentions were real, and that maybe, just maybe, she was deserving of more than the hard, lonely life she'd always known. Emily's farm began to thrive again, though she couldn't quite believe it. Her father, now healthier with the medicine James had provided, often joked that their farm had been touched by a miracle. Emily, however, knew the real miracle wasn't the money. It was James. The once intimidating man had become a regular presence in her life. He wasn't just a benefactor. He was someone who genuinely cared. He asked about her dreams, her struggles, and even her happiest childhood memories. And as much as Emily tried to keep her guard up, she couldn't deny that she was drawn to him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, James showed up unexpectedly. He was dressed casually this time, his sleeves rolled up and his usual polished demeanor replaced by something softer. "I thought I'd stop by," he said, holding up a basket of fresh produce he'd picked from the market. "Figured you could use a night off from cooking." Emily raised an eyebrow but couldn't suppress a smile. "I didn't think billionaires knew their way around a farmer's market. Let's just say I'm full of surprises," James replied with a grin. They spent the evening in the kitchen, laughing and chatting as they prepared a meal together. It was simple, roasted vegetables and freshly baked bread, but to Emily, it felt like the most luxurious dinner she'd ever had. As they sat down to eat, James grew uncharacteristically quiet. He looked at Emily, his expression unreadable, and then set his fork down. "I've been thinking about something," he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. Emily tilted her head, unsure of where he was going. "What's on your mind?" "When I first came here, it was to repay a debt. You saved my brother, and I felt obligated to help you. But now," he paused, running a hand through his hair. "Now it's not about obligation. It's about you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Emily, you're the strongest, most selfless person I've ever met, he continued. You've been through so much, and yet you still find ways to help others. You're incredible, and I care about you more than I thought possible. Her breath caught in her throat. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, convinced that no one would ever look at her as more than a struggling farmer's daughter. But here was James, a man who could have anything in the world, choosing to be with her. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Say you'll let me be part of your life, James said, his tone sincere, not just as someone who helps fix things, but as someone who stands by your side. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, and for once, she didn't fight them. She nodded, a small smile breaking through her emotions. Okay, she said, her voice trembling, but don't expect me to go easy on you. This life isn't exactly glamorous. James chuckled, reaching across the table to take her hand. I wouldn't want it any other way. Months later, the farm had become a symbol of transformation, not just for the land but for Emily herself. With James by her side and Oliver often visiting to help out, it felt like she finally had the family and support she had always dreamed of. One day, James surprised her with a gathering. The farmhouse was filled with laughter and warmth as neighbors, friends, and even some of James's colleagues joined to celebrate the farm's revival. Standing under the old oak tree that had been on the farm for generations, James turned to Emily and took her hands. You've given so much to everyone else, he said, his voice steady and full of emotion. It's time someone gave back to you. Before she could respond, he dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as James opened the box to reveal a simple yet stunning diamond ring. Emily, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, her heart too full for words. The crowd erupted into cheers, and for the first time in her life, Emily felt like the universe had finally given her a break. She wasn't just the farmer's daughter anymore. She was someone who had fought, endured, and ultimately found the happiness she deserved. And as she looked into James's eyes, she knew this was only the beginning of the life she had always dreamed of. A life filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.